Good talk, everyone. Shema Tov. Good morning. We're learning Mishna Bikurim, Perek Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishnah Yud Aleph, Mishnah 11. I dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Hakaina Shleisha Ilanis B'Sei Shal Chaveirei. One who buys 3 trees in someone else's property, maybe V'Kairei brings Bikurim and does the reading of the passages. And that's because if you buy 3 trees, you're not just buying the trees, you're buying the tree that's under, around, and therefore when therefore you're bringing Bikurim because you have land coming from your land, and you can say the land that you have given me. That is the opinion, that's the first opinion of the Mishnah. Remeir says even 2. The mayor says when you buy 2 trees, the land goes along with it. What I really should have spoken out is that the case here is you're buying trees. There was no specifying what about the land. The deal was trees. And the question is that when you make that kind of a deal, does the land go along with it? So the Tanna Kama says if you buy 3 trees, it's understood that the land goes along with it. Less than 3 trees, it's not understood. Rabbi Meir says afilu shnayim. Rabbi Meir says even 2 trees, it's understood the land is going along with it. And therefore, according to Rabbi Meir, in that case, you're going to bring the Bikurim and do the reading. Kana ilan v'karkai. Now, you bought a tree and its land. It means you're buying 1 tree, but the deal is I'm buying the tree and the land. Maybe v'kairei. In that case, you bring and you read. Now, this part of the Mishnah is going according to the Tanna Kama, because it's very clear that the point of the wording of the Mishnah is that you bought the tree and the land. You specifically said the land. If you wouldn't have said the land, what would it have been? If you wouldn't have said the land, then it means that when you buy 1 tree, you're only buying the tree. There is no land. And if you don't own the land under the tree, then, or if you don't own the land where the tree is growing, you don't even bring Bikurim. You don't even have obligation to bring Bikurim from that. So according to the Tanna Kama, we have the Mishnah saying 3 trees without specifying the land, you bring Bikurim and you do the reading. Then we have a case of where the Mishnah talks about you bought 1 tree and the ground, which implies that without the ground, buying 1 tree, you're not going to do anything. What if you buy 2, according to the Tanna Kama, according to the first one in the Mishnah? What if you buy 2? The Meir said 2, the land goes along. Tanna Kama said 3. So we had a previous Mishnah that according to the Tanna Kama, 2 is a suffix, 2 is a question as to whether the land goes along with it or not. And therefore, perhaps the land goes along with it. Perhaps you have an obligation with Bikurim. You're going to bring the Bikurim. But you're not going to read the passages because in those passages you mention the land that you have given me. I may not have any land here. So therefore, you bring and you don't read. So according to the Tanna Kama, by 3, again, the sale was just trees. It's understood the ground goes along. You bring the Bikurim, you do the reading. 2, it's a question if the land goes along. You bring the Bikurim, you don't do the reading. 1, without mentioning the land, you don't do anything. If you mention the land, which means the sale was specifically the tree and the ground with it, then you bring Bikurim and you do the reading. According to Rabbi, when you have 2 trees and up, then it's understood that you're buying the trees and the land around it, under it and around it. Therefore, you will bring the Bikurim and do the reading. If you buy 1 tree, and again, without mentioning the land, it's a suffix, it's a doubt. Meaning the same thing we had before by the Tanna Kama, difference between 3 and 2, according to Rabbi Meir, that's the difference between 2 and 1. 2, it's assumed it's understood the land goes along. 1, it's a question. It seems to be a question as to what the deal is. And therefore, in that case, according to Rabbi Meir, by 1, you're going to bring the Bikurim, you're not going to do the reading. You're bringing the Bikurim because maybe you own the land. You can't bring the reading because maybe you can't say the land that was given to me. And we don't want you saying a possible lie or a possible falsehood. And therefore, you don't do the reading when there is a doubt whether the land goes along with it. Okay, so that's the first part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah then continues. Rabbi Yehuda says, even the sharecroppers and the tenant farmers bring the Bikurim and do the reading. Now, this is going back on the previous Mishnah, where we had the Mishnah saying, if you're a sharecropper or a tenant farmer, a sharecropper is the one that gets a percentage of the crops. A tenant farmer has to basically rents the land for a certain amount of the crops, for a certain percentage of the crops, no matter how much crops grow. Or actually, it's not a percentage, a set amount of crops, no matter how much grows. And before, the Mishnah said that you don't do anything there because you don't own the land. Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying no, that these people do bring Bikurim. The problem is, if they don't own the land, how can they bring Bikurim? And therefore, the commentaries explain that the case here by Rabbi Yehuda, where Rabbi Yehuda is saying they do say, is different than before. Because this case by Rabbi Yehuda is talking about where these, whether they're sharecroppers or tenant farmers, they have the exclusive right to the land for that. No one else can use it for that. They got themselves a right. They bought themselves a right. They are the exclusive people that can do sharecropping or tenant farming on this land. Nobody else can do it. Meaning, in the first time we mentioned this, the person made a deal for a year or a couple of years. You're not permanent there. You have no rights in the land. However, if you're permanent, you got yourself a permanent right in this land to be the sharecropper, be the tenant farmer. You have it. It's yours forever. So there, Rabbi Yehuda says, once you have that kind of a right in the land, although you don't own the land, at the end of the day, this right in the land is only for getting the crops. Nonetheless, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if that right is a permanent right, that's called that you do have a certain level of ownership in the land, and it's enough to be able to have an obligation for Bikurim and even to do the reading. Again, this is the first time we spoke about this in the previous Mishnah. There was no distinction, meaning Rabbi Yehuda is making a distinction now about this. If it's Rabbi Yehuda saying it, that means that this is his opinion. It doesn't mean the previous Mishnah that didn't mention this at all would mean that the Tanakama, the opinion there, doesn't agree. That even in a case where it's permanent, still, you don't own the land like a person who owns the land, and therefore you wouldn't even bring the Bikurim in those cases. Okay, and as the Bartanura points out, the halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So no sharecroppers, no tenant farmers, even if they have a permanent right in the land, they would not be bringing Bikurim or doing the reading. Okay, so we're now continuing with the laws of Rechilas, the Chavetz Chaim. We began chapter 9, and the first paragraph, the first sif, the Chavetz Chaim had mentioned that we're now going to be discussing a situation where Reuven wants to go into a partnership with Shimon, and you know that if Reuven goes into a partnership with Shimon, he's going to be in big trouble. So you have to tell Reuven, so therefore you should be telling Reuven about these problems with Shimon. It's not Lashon Harah, it's not a prohibition of Lashon Harah Rechilas, because of the fact you're doing it to help the person. But the Chavetz Chaim said in Sif Beis that there are 5 conditions that have to be met before you can do it. We read a couple of them Friday, and we'll finish it up today. So the ones that we read on Friday are that, this decision that you've made that there's going to be trouble if Reuven goes into partnership with Shimon, you have to think it through well. Don't jump to conclusions. You have to think it through well that there are really going to be problems. Number 2, when you tell it to Reuven, no exaggerating, no making it bigger than it is. Number 3, your intention has to be to help Reuven, not to get back at Shimon. And he also added that when we're talking about that your intention has to be for Te'elis, has to be constructive purpose in it, it means that you have to make sure that there's going to be constructive purpose in it, that this person is going to listen to you. If he's not going to listen to you, there's no point. And even more said the Chavetz Chaim, he can actually make even bigger trouble, because at one point, when Reuven and Shimon do get into a fight, Reuven's going to say to Shimon, when so-and-so told me about you, that was really true. That means you're causing him to speak Rechilas. So if you know it's the kind of person to do that, then for sure, you cannot relate this information to him if, again, he's not going to listen. Now, Dalet. The whole point of telling Reuven about the problems with Shimon is to protect him. Well, let's say you can protect Reuven, whatever it may be. Maybe you can get the partnership to end without having to tell him about Shimon. If you can do that, if the goal that you want to get, which is to help Reuven, you can do that without having to telling him the negative stuff about Shimon, you're obligated to do that. Hey, number 5. This is only talking about where by telling Reuven about Shimon, there will not be any direct damage done to Shimon. Meaning nothing, meaning, it shouldn't come out that because of this, others will actually harm Shimon in some way. The point is, you're breaking up a partnership. Reuven wanted to go into a partnership with Shimon. That would have been to Shimon's benefit. So now you tell Reuven about Shimon. So now Shimon loses the chance of the partnership. Okay, clearly that's not good for him. But the point is that what happened here is that you prevented Reuven from benefiting Shimon. Now, but if let's say because of this, people for some reason are now going to go and do bad with Shimon. If you tell Reuven about Shimon's problems, Reuven somehow or another is now going to go after Shimon in a way. He's going to go after him. He's going to harm him in some kind of way. Meaning he's going to do something that is directly that is not to the benefit of Shimon. You can't do that. Because in order for that to be able to happen, which means you're telling Reuven about Shimon, and now it's going to come out if that's what Reuven hears about Shimon. So Reuven may want to now actually do something because of now that he hears about Shimon doing these things, he may actually want to go after Shimon in some way for it. Now, not in the case of revenge, but in case, and let's say it comes out that from this information, Shimon actually has done something wrong to Reuven. Reuven wants to do something about it. Maybe it comes out that based on the information, it comes out that Shimon's already been doing funny things, and Reuven now wants to go do something to get something back from him. Well, that means that Reuven's actually not just going to decide I'm not partnering with him. Reuven's going to do something to him. You need more than these 5 conditions to be able to do that. Which he says we'll discuss later on. And all the more so, and of course, if let's say the situation is that by now telling Reuven about Shimon, Reuven will now do something to Shimon that wouldn't even happen to Shimon in a rabbinical court, which means by law, according to Jewish law, what Reuven's going to do to Shimon is wrong. If it comes out that the information that you share with Reuven about Shimon is something that, let's say, Reuven can do something about, you can go to a Beis Din for it. Okay, there's going to be more than 5. So you want to tell him, so it comes out, there is a ta'elis, there's a constructive purpose. But if what's happening here is more than just a breakup, a partnership, I shouldn't even use the word breakup. He doesn't go into the partnership with Shimon. Then the 5 conditions are met. Reuven doesn't go into the partnership with Shimon. Shimon loses out on that benefit. Okay, that's what happens. But if what happens through base what you're saying, something more than that's going to happen. It's not just that Reuven will not do a benefit to Shimon. Some other Reuven will do something to Shimon. Now, maybe he has the right to do it. But for you now to reveal that to Reuven, you cannot just rely on the 5 conditions. There's more conditions you have to do. And if it comes out that by telling Reuven about Reuven about Shimon, Reuven will now do something to Shimon that is even wrong to do to him. Even if we take Shimon to Beis Din, the Beis Din would never do anything to Shimon for it. Which means if Reuven now does something to Shimon, he's doing it wrongfully. Then of course he can't go in and tell Reuven about it, because that means that Shimon is going to be harmed where he's not supposed to. So again, you may want to tell Reuven not go into partnership with Shimon, but if that's based on information that because of that, Reuven will do something to Shimon that is wrong, because Shimon didn't do anything that was wrong enough that Beis Din that he can be taken to Beis Din, to rabbinical court, do something about it. And that means that what's going to happen to Shimon is being wrongfully done. You cannot tell Reuven about that, even though you can't tell Reuven that information that Reuven will then misuse, even though it means he may go into a partnership with him and get in trouble. If what you tell Reuven will not act upon that and do something that in a rabbinical court could be carried out, okay, so then there are more than these 5 conditions that have to be met in order for you to do that. But if at the end of the day, based on the information that you tell Reuven about Shimon, Reuven will now harm Shimon wrongfully, which means he couldn't take Shimon to Beis Din in order to get what he wants, and you know Reuven's going to do it anyway, then you can't share this information with Reuven, even though it means Reuven going into the partnership and getting himself in the trouble. Have a good Tvach. Wonderful week. All the best.